Very, very nice to meet you. Awesome to get you on. So very, very cool.
You
Uh,
may not feel that way when it's over with.
oh my God. But as we head towards the beginning here, I want to do a brief little intro. Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. Host AJP John Poz. With me today is the founder and former owner of OVW, the Nightmare himself, Mr. Danny Davis. Danny, welcome in. How you doing?
Very good, John. Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Yes, and I know unfortunately we're both buddies with Dr. Tom Prichard, so I don't know if unfortunately we're both friends with him. Yeah.
Well, some things just can't be helped. You just have to accept them the way they are.
Yes, yes. So what's going on in your world? What are you up to?
Hey, I'm a retired guy. I'm 3 days older in dirt, and I enjoy the Florida sun. And when I turned the keys over to Al Snow and his band of brothers, I basically retired from the business. I haven't watched wrestling. I haven't seen anything really since then. I've done a handful of these things that we're doing, but I had when I retired, I said I was never going to get back in any way, shape, form, or fashion, and yet here I am. You pulled me in.
Yes, yes. They never, fully retire, right? Wrestlers never fully retire.
Well, some of us say we will, but yet something seems to bring us back, and I've enjoyed the last few of these that I've done. I've enjoyed, and hopefully, I'll enjoy this one with you.
Yes, hopefully, God willing. I hope. So, how come no interest in like watching like current wrestling? It's just one of those things where you just have, just were done with it when you left.
Yeah, well, 42 years of my life was devoted to it, and look, honestly, I was burnt. I was flat burnt out. The stress of running a company when you're dealing with WWE is monumental. The stress of running that same company with the same overhead without WWE is financially draining and extremely stressful. And so, at the end of it, 10 years after WWE pulled the plug, I was still in business. The only company to survive a WWE pullout. Everyone else folded, went away, but OVW, was still there, and that was my plan for it to never go anywhere. And I just had all I could take, and my mind needed a break.
It's one of those things when you look at OVW, it's crazy, like the history of OVW, and it's kind of all thanks to you when you really think about it. It's really remarkable.
Not just me. We have to thank Jim Ross, Jim Cornette. We have to thank Dr. Tom Prichard, and we have to thank Hustler Rip Rogers, who was an awesome trainer. And I obviously I played a part in it, but there's just so many guys that I was able to put together, guys that I knew would be perfect for the role. And as it turned out, it worked out very well. We produced a lot of talent back in the day, and hey, even today, from what I understand, they're still headlining WrestleMania, etc. today.
Absolutely. Now, like if I'm thinking about it now, I'm like, oh, it's so obvious. The feeder program into WB. Then that not obvious at all, not really that much of a thought. Like, how does that even come about? Because when you think about it, that was such like a life-changing, monumental shift just in wrestling that you need kind of a feeder lead to get them ready for WWE. So how does that even come about?
Well, I retired from in-ring work in probably 92, I guess 91, 92. And I was scheduled to wrestle in Japan, and that trip got canceled. And I just decided, I lived around Louisville, Kentucky at the time, which was a big wrestling town. And, a lot of people would come to me and say, hey, how do I get into wrestling? Anybody can train me. And, the light bulb went off, and I just said, well, I've coached a few guys. I mentored Stone Cold. I mentored a lot of guys, and I thought, well, why not? I'll just try it. So I opened a little place and started the wrestling school. And next thing you know, in a year's time, it went from like 10 guys to 150 guys and gals. And so, it got to the point to where I had to start running some local shows to give them some, some practice in front of an audience. And we ran a bunch of little shows and whatnot. And then in 1998, I bought a bunch of television equipment because I thought, you know what? I need a television show. And so I didn't know anything about editing or anything like that. I bought the equipment, read the manuals, and, set everything up at my little old arena there in Jeffersonville, Indiana, and just slowly started putting things together. So then at the same time, Jim Cornette was working, for WWF in Stamford. He was in the office. And so Jim and I have been friends for many years. And so I'd send him a demo tape of what we were doing, and he goes, oh, wow. He says, man, everything looks good. And then we talked about the developmental thing, and he pitched it to Jim Ross, and JR liked the idea, liked the concept, because I think at the time WWF they were burning through talent, and they needed someone. So they sent Bruce Prichard down to talk to me, and he and I come to an agreement because I think Bruce was working for JR and developed talent, relations at the time. And so we come to a real easy agreement. And so Jim Cornette, he kind of made the bridge there. And when he was looking to get out of Stanford, and so he came down, relocated to Louisville, which is where he's actually from. And so it was easy from there. He came in, and Rip had his role. Jimmy had his role. I had my role, and we were respective of each other's positions, and neither of us never tried to step on anybody's toe, because I knew what Rip could do in the ring as far as teaching. I also helped out, but Jimmy was the booker, and the brains behind television, et cetera, et cetera. And I was the guy sitting there, directing it all, and keeping time and doing all of that. So that went well until it didn't.
Right.
But that was several years later down the line. I mean, we were fortunate enough to produce, what I honestly think is some of, if not the best talent that has ever, been on television. Because, when you think about Cena, Lesnar, Batista, and Orton, those guys, I mean, you just don't get any better than that. And one of the things I really liked was most of those guys, like Orton and like Cena and like Lesnar, I didn't have to babysit them. Those guys, when I first met them, I knew right then that they were on the ball. I mean, 5 minutes after I met John Cena, I knew that I was not going to have to worry about him because, a lot of guys felt, and I won't name names, but a lot of guys felt like they were entitled to, certain favoritisms. And, like me finding an apartment for them or whatever like that, right? And, those guys that I mentioned, they already had their stuff set up, and, I never had to worry about anything. And all they had to do was show up, listen, and execute what they were taught, and they did.
It is so interesting, like as far as those guys, like you mentioned, Cena, Orton, Lesnar, Batista, like just become huge names. Where did they actually get those talents from? Like, who was scouting for you? Are you scouting for these guys to be brought in?
I was not scouting, but JR, I think he went to in Minnesota. That's where he found Shelton Benjamin and Brock Lesnar. He found them, and of course Batista. He was a big guy. I think he found those at the Wild Samoans school, and of course Prototype. I think he was out in California working with Rick Bassman at the time, I think. And but I think Tom Prichard played a role in that too. I think he may have had some. He helped him with the recruiting and whatnot. So basically, OVW didn't recruit a lot of those guys. I mean, many of them were already OVW talent. They had been with me for about 5 years. And, I hand trained each one of those guys: Nick Dinsmore, Rob Conway, Doug Basham, Trailer Park Trash, and just on and on, all those guys. And a lot of them got signed, a lot of them didn't. But JR, I think he went around. He had contacts with several of the schools that had the best wrestlers, in their amateur wrestlers, in their school programs, and that's how he found a lot of those guys. And Briscoe, Briscoe may have had something to do with it.
It's crazy to think like, okay, we're going to start up this league. Let's see if it works. Let's see if it doesn't work. If you put those 4 names out there, Lesnar, Orton, Cena, Batista, it's like, okay, not only did it work, those are 4 main event WrestleMania guys. That's like the tippy top of the food chain. So it worked. It like worked almost too well. Like that's how crazy it was.
Absolutely. But I think in the 9.5 years that OVW, trained talent for WWE, I think we sent up somewhere around about 140 talent, men and women, and a lot of them done very well for themselves. When
you're bringing them in, like, do you think like, Vince will love this guy, like Cena? Look at how Vince will love this guy, or that's not a thought with you guys. You're not thinking of like necessarily Vince will love the guy right off the bat, or is that a thought?
Yeah, it with me it was a thought, and I think with Jimmy as well, it was a thought. The thing there was OVW, Jim Cornette, Danny Davis, and Rip. We had a vision for these guys, but the writers in WWE at the time didn't have the same vision. So we would train these guys in a certain way. And the reason we did that was because we knew what their strengths and their weaknesses was. We knew what they could and could not do. Okay. Now, when they pulled the guy up, and instead of using him under the character that we developed for them, 99% of the time they wanted to put him in another character. Well, they would go up totally, discombobulated, so to speak, because, they had been training one way and they were good at the characters that we developed for them, but they didn't get to use those. And I don't know if that was intentional or what, I have no idea. I just know that on a daily basis, after Jim Ross left Talent Relations, it was a headache to do business with them. It really was. It was things weren't as smooth as they had been. They weren't as smooth as they should have been. They damn sure wasn't as smooth as they, were going to be. It was just, it was a lot of sleepless nights for me and a lot of hair pulling, even though I still got mine a little bit,
Yeah, lucky. Damn, you definitely do. That is true. If you look at even like go back like to Batista, because I know he wasn't doing this or that, and they kind of changed it up. But for his gimmick in OVW, like that was perfect. He's a monster. He's just a destroyer.
Hey, when you see a guy wade out of the Mississippi River at midnight, come on, and look like he did. Oh my God. I mean, it was the perfect character, something that WWE could have taken and ran with because, hey, Cornette knows what he's doing. When it comes to talent and when it comes to developing a character that is meant for that individual, there's none better. Bottom line, none better.
And he previously worked for Vince, so he knows what Vince is looking for, what he's not looking for, right?
Exactly. and at the same time, like I said, we had Tom Prichard, in the office up there, who was helping JR as well, and Tom was a big help. Tom was a big help there. So
When you look at Cornette, I mean,
yeah,
obviously, very controversial nowadays, even though he really
yep.
shouldn't be because he's the best in the business. But some people just don't like his brutal honesty, right? So, what do you think about Jimmy Cornette when you really look at it?
Well, first off, I love Jimmy. Doesn't matter what anybody thinks of him, because trust me, it doesn't bother him.
Yeah,
It doesn't bother him. Matter of fact, I think, and Jimmy, forgive me, but if you see this, but I think Jimmy thrives on that. If he gets under somebody's skin, he's like, yes, that's just JC, man. That's just him. I've known him for ever since I got into business. When he was taking pictures, he's a good kid. And I call him a kid because he's a lot younger than I am, but he's a hell of a lot smarter. And when it comes to making stars in pro wrestling, Jim Cornette is as good as they come, bottom line.
I feel like he gets some unnecessary heat. I had the opportunity and the privilege of working with him a few times, like some signings and different things, and bringing him in. He actually did a one-man show for me. He had the Midnight Express, the whole group. They came in for me. He was so awesome. He was so cool. He was so easy to work with. Maybe he doesn't want me to say how nice of a guy he is. Maybe I might hurt the gimmick, but he was unbelievable. Even some of like the stuff, like the breakdown of the money. He's like, screw this. That. Gave me one of those scrapbooks. I mean, he was awesome to me. So I don't know, when people say stuff, I feel like maybe he's being a little bit in gimmick.
Well, Jimmy can't he can rub some people the wrong way, but that's Jimmy. He's always been like that, And I'm going to tell you a quick story.
Yes.
We were doing it. We were taping TV one night, and I'm in my office, and I'm pushing the buttons, keeping time. We went to a break, and back in those days, we went live to tape, and so we were in like a 7 or 8 minute dark segment, and we had a match going on out there in the ring. Something didn't go right. Jimmy comes in, he grabs my desk, he flips it up in the air, turns over. It had the glass top and everything, right? And I'm just sitting there, keeping time, this, that, and that. Didn't even faze me, right? And Jimmy he comes back, and he's like, "Oh my God, did I do that?" He didn't know he did. But,
oh my God!
But that's how passionate he is about the product he puts out. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yes.
when somebody cares that much, that he just gets so enthralled in what he's doing, and he forgets what he's doing off camera. He's totally focused on his business, and hey, you got to admire that. And I did. It didn't bother me one bit that the desk was over, the drawers and everything was. It didn't bother me one bit. I don't think Jimmy and I ever had an argument. You know what I'm saying? And that's
wow.
unusual. And that's unusual.
Yeah. That's kind of surprising. Yeah, especially just because the high octane nervousness and pressure of WWE dealing with you guys and stuff. That's crazy.
Yep. Well, it's like I never stepped on his toes as it relates to booking or television or anything like that. He never stepped on mine when it come to, live to tape and times and all that stuff. So, I mean, it was just, we respected each other's boundaries, and we never encroached on the other. And to me, that's how things, get done well.
And I feel like his passion also sometimes gets turned into something else too, like this Santino Marella situation. They kind of turned that into something maybe when he went a little too passionate about, keeping kayfabe and not, making a joke of a WWE gimmick that they're trying to make into a monster.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That I don't want to say it got out of hand, but it kind of did. And, it's just, I think WWE didn't, ended up not liking it, to some point, but he's trying to prove a point. The point was, when something's going on, you have to be in that moment, be in the present. Whatever's happening at that moment, you react to what's going on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When you look at him, like in his time there, is that the highlight of OVW, like his booking and that period? Or would you say like Heyman came in? Did you think that was like because that was a good point too, I feel like in OVW, but that had to be the Cornette time, right? His period was the highlight.
Yeah, for me, it was with Jimmy, because I knew Jimmy for so long, and I knew Paul, I'd worked with Paul, before, down in the old Southeastern Continental days when he was down there with Eddie, Eddie Gilbert, and didn't have no issue there. And, look, Paul's got a brilliant mind too. It's different, than the way Jim Cornette's mind works, but I didn't have any issues with Paul Heyman when he was OVW. I rather liked him because he always had good stories. After the Wednesday night TV tapings, he would sit and talk to myself while I was doing the editing and whatnot, and he'd talk to my wife and just tell stories, and had no issue with Paul there at all. I did not. So.
There's that awesome picture of Cornette and Heyman backstage at OVW. Did
you see? I think we took a picture of that. They were in the interview room, and I think we took a picture of them there. So I don't know where that picture's at. I don't know where that picture's at though.
I don't know if
maybe Jimmy bought them all up because he didn't want that to get out.
Right.
I don't know, John. I don't know.
Somebody posted it online. I don't know who it was, but it was like hell froze over this day or something like that. I guess was that the passing, like the changing the guard there? Was that when Cornette was leaving and Paul was coming in, or what was going on with that day?
Yes. Yep. It was.
Man, that's crazy.
And Paul was a lot of blood and guts. He liked that. And in Kentucky, you had to get permission first, from the athletic commission. I mean, which is ridiculous in my view, because, but anyhow, Paul would do these, he would skirt the lines, man, and mount every week. I'd get a phone call from the athletic commission and I had to smooth all, it's just a lot of headaches. A lot of headaches. And John, I don't miss them. I do not miss those headaches, not one bit. I enjoy my time in Florida. I don't miss it. I don't miss it.
That's funny though, because like Paul is doing something crazy, you have to deal with it. You're the one that it's putting it on the line.
I had to deal with it. Yeah. Because I had to explain it, why I didn't have a form filled out, to get permission ahead of time. Well, I didn't know until 15 minutes before it was going to happen. Sometimes, wrestling, is just off the cuff, you just react to the moment. That's just the way it is.
What is so different about them philosophy-wise, Cornette, Heyman? Because like you said, it's a lot different styles.
Yeah, well, I think philosophy-wise, Cornette was more real-oriented as it relates to the talent selling certain things. Now as Paul, I think he was also gifted with his finishes and things, but the guys didn't sell things like they should have. See, I'm old school. I don't know if you know, but Ron Fuller and Robert Fuller's dad, Buddy Fuller, broke me into business. And in those days, you kept your mouth shut. You didn't talk anything about business, with anybody except who was already in the business. And if you did, more than likely, you were going to get your butt beat. And if there was another incident, you'd be floating in a river somewhere, and that's, and I guess, you have to change with the times, but man, I bet they're all rolling over in their graves now because of the way things are, the way things are, right. used to everyone believed. I'll tell you a quick story. When I was about 4 or 5 years old, my very first recollection of wrestling, I was sitting on my mom's dad, my grandpa's lap, in front of about a 13-inch black and white TV. I was about 2 feet away from the screen, and I remember Grandpa with his pocket knife out in his hand saying, "I'll cut you, you dirty SOB, I'll cut you." So it went from that to everybody knowing everything. How does that happen in 40 or 50 years? So.
Yeah. How did that happen? Is it just that the fans just obsession with wanting to learn more and know more about the business?
I don't think it was necessarily that. I just think it was the people in the business who didn't have the love for it or who didn't succeed. Some of those guys probably started leaking information and whatnot, and just one thing led to another, and here we are. And here we are.
Yeah, man. I mean, now they're having documentaries about
Yes.
why the storylines are the way they are and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
They even
I
have
had I don't even know why I'm thinking this, but at some point I thought about writing a book.
Nice.
Because I spent 2 tours in Calgary, and I spent a lot of time around Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith, Jim Neidhart, Bret Hart, all the Hart boys, and I got a lot of stuff up here that's never been out, and I don't know if I would ever want to put it in a book because I'd have to name names, and I'm just not one of those guys, It's not one of those guys. But there's a lot of stuff I'd like to put out because, the things I saw, the things I did, I mean, a lot of life-changing things there. I mean, the 80s was a wonderful time for those of us in the business. It was probably the best of times, if that makes sense. But I don't know if I'll ever put it down on book form or not. You never know.
Yeah, it'd be a great idea. You, like you said, 40 plus years in the business, the 80s, living through the Stampede territory. I mean,
yes,
you got a lot of good stuff there. That'd be awesome.
A lot of good stuff, but a lot of scary stuff.
What did you think about that territory? The Stampede territory.
I love the territory. The territory treated me good. I mean, it really did. Treated me good. There was you had to be you had to get along with certain guys really well in order to, spend any time there, because if you didn't, they would ride your ass to the point to where you'd want to kill yourself, and I had no problem with anybody. So that's I got along with everybody, even Dynamite Kid, but he was a character.
Tough to get along with, huh? His
If he liked you, he liked you. If he didn't like you, you wouldn't stay in the territory long because he would run you off.
What did you think about him in ring? Everyone always talks about how one of the all time greats.
He was phenomenal in the ring. He was very good in the ring, and everything he did was very believable, because most of it was. And I tagged with him a few times on a lot of the spot shows up there in Calgary, and we gelled. We didn't have really any. Our styles were not quite the same, but we gelled. When we worked as a team.
I know it's more of a territory Stampede, but it's almost like a precursor to OVW in a certain sense, where it's like so many good guys went through there before they made it even bigger in WWF or elsewhere. It's like everybody went, right? Superstar Billy Graham got trained by the Heart. So
man, there's a lot of there was Stu had a lot of talent come through there, and all of his boys, Brett all the way down to Owen, God rest his soul. They had the opportunity to see and actually meet, talk to, hear some stories from all of those greats, and the big house on the hill. There were many great dinners there. There were just a lot of just good times. Good times.
Was it tough to survive in that territory? I would imagine the travel would suck and the weather would suck at most times in that territory.
When I first went there, my partner at the time, Ken Lane, we drove up to Calgary, and we were there like I think the first or second week of June of 1981. I think it was 80 or 81, and we didn't carry any winter clothes because it was June. Well, it was snowing when we got there in June, so we had to make find a place where we could buy some foul weather gear. We had no clue. Back in the day, you didn't have cell phones, no social media, nothing. You had a map and you had a phone number to call. When you got to the border, so Stu could get us through. And it was snowing, and Monday nights was Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Tuesday night was Regina, Saskatchewan. Wednesday night we had to go all the way back to Calgary, but we went to what was it? Red Deer. Yeah, Thursday was a spot show. Friday was Calgary, and then Saturday was a spot show somewhere. And from Regina, Saskatchewan on Tuesday to back to Calgary was 500 miles. Right smack in the middle, 250 miles, was one gas station. If you did not get there before they closed at midnight, you were sitting on the side of the road till the next morning, because it was nothing but prairie land there. It's just wide open, and when it wasn't winter, I mean, during the day you could see all the wild antelope and just, the caribou. I mean, just wildlife was just out of this world. Matter of fact, Ken and I, with two other guys in Ken's car, we rounded a curb and hit a big caribou, totaled Ken's car completely.
Whoa.
Yeah, and it was that thing. It looked like an elk. I mean, they were huge. So.
Oh God, yeah, I've seen them before. Yeah, they were like monsters. Yeah, crazy.
You're right. Yeah, but it was a real good experience. I enjoyed it. Like I said, I did 2 tours there, but I think I came back to Jerry Lawler called me, and he called me and said he was putting a tag team together and have Jim Cornette manage them. And it was the first tag team that Jim Cornette ever managed. And that was the Galaxians, Alpha and Beta. And he wanted me to team up with Ken, and be the Galaxians. And I said, man, I'm doing great up here, and he made it worth my while to come back. And so we did, and then we started working with the Rock and Roll Express. And one Tuesday night in Louisville, Kentucky, Robert went to backdrop me, and somehow or another he lost his footing or something, and he got me in the air, and we both fell. Boom. I fractured a couple of vertebrae in my back. I had to be carted out of the ring because I couldn't walk. And the next night we had Evansville, Indiana, and I don't think I worked that because I couldn't. And Bobby Fulton took my gear and stepped in for me, and I was off for about 2 months because I had to have my back. They wanted to do surgery, and I wouldn't do it. But I want to say this, something that's unheard of in the business back in the day. While I was off, Jerry Lawler had me a check every week. Whatever I was supposed to make, $1,000, $1,500, whatever it was at the time, I had a check waiting on me every week. And
amazing! Yeah, they don't do that, right? You have to work to get it.
They never did that, and I was just, Lawler and I were pretty good friends. He was the reason I got into business because I loved his heel character, when I used to watch him on TV. But also, and I guess you know this, maybe you don't, but when he gave Andy Kaufman the pile driver, in Memphis, I was Lawler's manager. It wasn't Jimmy Hart. He wasn't there yet, but I was his manager doing all that time. And crowd got a big pop when Lawler ended up pile driving, and the ambulance was coming in to cart him out. And I nudged Lawler. I said, "Get the microphone and tell the people that maybe he should call a taxi, not an ambulance." And so he did. Of course, the house come down. And 2 weeks later, I was replaced by Jimmy Hart, and I was let go. Don't ask me why. Some said I was trying to outthink the boss. Had nothing to do with it. There was a moment there that was perfect for it, and I just called an audible. And I think they were going to replace me anyway, but it seemed kind of funny there for a bit.
Yeah, weird. Damn, I didn't realize that. Wow, that's crazy because obviously the Kaufman thing is so famous and just one of those things that everybody remembers from '82. Crazy.
Yep. The good old days. Yeah.
Yes.
I used to drive Lawler around everywhere. Yep.
Wow. Awesome.
So maybe
that.
maybe that's why he paid me when I was off. I don't know, but I know he was good to me, and so hey. That's a good thing for me.
And man, that Kaufman stuff, that even made headline news in New York when they got Letterman. They were doing the Letterman show and stuff. So crazy.
Absolutely.
How over that got.
Yeah. And Andy Kaufman was a great guy. He never broke kayfabe. He kept all of his friends. He made them believe everything. And that was the secret to everything. It was It's a good thing. It's a good thing.
He paid for the hospital bill, right? If I remember, I think Dutch was telling me he paid for the hospital bill, I think.
Yep, he did. That's how much he loved the business. He wanted a platform. I think he went to Vince with something like that, or Vince Senior or somebody, and I think no, they didn't want to do it. Well, Tennessee territory, man, they jumped right all over that, and then you see what happened. I mean, they got worldwide notoriety right there.
Yeah. So you and Ken, obviously, the Nightmares, like you mentioned, the Galaxians. When you guys are together, where do you kind of make your biggest headway? Like, where do you guys make your, big moment in the business? Like, obviously, Memphis is a good area for you guys, but is that your most popular, or like?
I think it was Southeastern. Southeastern down with the. Ron Fuller and Robert, and Bob Armstrong and those guys. Actually, Ken and I were working as Nightmares, doing a little. We were working in Tennessee, but we went to Georgia and worked for Ole some, and we were working with Brad Armstrong and Tim Horner, White Lightning, and we were just tearing the house down with those guys. And Brad's dad, I think, was booking at the time in Pensacola. And he said, "Hey, if you ever get a chance, man, talk to these guys, Nightmares, and bring them in because he said, and this is Brad's words, he put us over as, being kind of well-oiled machines, little small guys, but well-oiled machines and knew how to get heat. And so we ended up, getting a call, and we gave her notice in Memphis and started in, I think it was March of 1985. That's when we first went there. And that was thanks to Brad. He got us in. Originally, we were scheduled to be in for 3 months, and then we were going to move on. But Ron told me, he says, "You guys have done so well, we stayed almost a year, and then he gave us our notice, and it kind of hurt him almost as much as it hurt me because he said, "Man, you guys have done so well for us. Didn't think you were going to be here, this long, but it worked out." So we went back to Memphis for a few months, and then they called us to come back in as faces, and so we did that. So I think to answer your question, working in Continental and the Southeastern Territory, for me, was basically the highlight of, was the most fun I'd ever had, I guess. Memphis is where I broke in the business, and I certainly enjoyed that. Managing the Blonde Bombers, and that all that was good, but I think our time spent in Southeastern and Pensacola, Mobile area was an amazing time. We traveled less than 1,000 miles a week. We were on the beach every day, and it was a great time. It was a great time.
So many of the guys that I talk to always say they love that territory so much. Dr. Tom always talks about it. Kevin Sullivan always talked about it.
Yeah.
Just like how great that territory is. Short trips, and you're on the beach all the time. And obviously, the women down there are like beyond belief. So there were the combination of all three. It's like, oh, this is the best, and the money was great.
It was a trifecta. You couldn't ask for anything better. You could not, John. It was the best of times, and I was maybe mid-30s, I guess, at the time. So it was a great time.
Sounds like a great trip, especially not far trips, and then you basically end up on the beach every day. That's pretty good.
Hey, it's like every day was a day off. Because our longest trip was Birmingham, Alabama, 250 miles one way.
Wow.
And that wasn't bad, for wrestling back in the day, because everybody had to drive by car unless you were with New York or WCW, but even though a lot of those guys had to travel by car, and it was a great time, absolutely a great time.
I was always curious, and I know you technically won one of these down there in CCW, whatever, in Continental. Yep. The IROC Camaro. Do you actually win the IROC Camaro? So they actually gave it to you? Actually got one?
Yeah. After I paid $25,000 for it, yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Such like an awesome gimmick, but what a tease! Well, damn, you don't actually win; you have to pay for it. Oh my God!
No. I was buying the car anyway, right?
Right.
So I go to Ron and say, hey, well, let's just do a battle royal thing, and why not? And we did, and it worked. And I took a ball back to the car, did some damage, and then took the ball back to Kenny. He bled out of his mouth for a while, and they got a lot of heat, and we drew a lot of money. So
love that. My dad I drove
the car everywhere. So
when we were younger, my dad and I wrecked Camaro, so I love that car. That's such an awesome car, maybe the best. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it was a good car. I got that at a dealership. Don't even remember the name in Birmingham, and it was built in Norwood, Ohio. It was a kind of a special built car.
My cousin, not that long ago, damn, I don't know if I could find it. My dad actually, when his mid-age or middle, what do you call it, middle-age crisis or whatever. Basically was
midlife crisis.
There you go, midlife crisis. There you go. He ended up selling it to a cousin of mine, older cousin, but one of my cousins. And he had it for a while, and a few years ago, he actually sent me a picture. He goes, you remember this? I was like, oh, my God. He's like, oh, I ended up, when my midlife crisis was over, I ended up selling it. So I was like, damn it, I wonder what happened to that car. It's awesome. It's an 82 IROC. It just looks awesome. I was like, damn it. I was like, I would want it today. I would want it.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, mine was an 87. And hold on one second.
Okay. Yes. I want to look to see if I could find it here.
Look at that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Yep. Oh, my God. Yeah, that's awesome. You must love it, though. You got it right there ready for you.
I still keep it. In my bedroom.
That's awesome. Damn, I don't know.
It brings back good memories,
Yes.
Not to mention that back in those days, that picture sold enough to pay for it. So,
whoa, really?
it was a good time. It was a good time.
Basically, you're selling a lot of gimmicks, if you will.
Merchandise, yes.
A lot of merch.
I had shirts. I had T-shirts made with that vehicle. I had all kind of pictures made with that vehicle. I mean, just it paid for itself.
Man, I wish I could find it. Damn. Oh my God, here it is. I don't know if you could see that. If it's gonna pop up there.
Nice.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
So that was an 82.
82, yeah. Awesome.
They were good. That car would be worth some money now, just like my IROC, would be worth money. And
oh God, yeah.
I don't know where it ended up. I was making a trip to Memphis, Tennessee, down around Elizabethtown, Kentucky, back in the 92, maybe 93. Caught on fire. I'm driving down the highway. I'm in shorts, and my gauges started going crazy. Like what? Started losing power. I coasted off of an exit there, and I opened the door. Flames scorched all the hair off my legs.
Oh my God, Jesus!
So anyway, a passerby came by and had a fire extinguisher. I put it out as much as I could, and it burned up, and don't know why. The insurance never told me. They just wrote me a check. And I think somewhere in Indiana ended up buying it, because I think whoever had it, the junkyard, I think they had it and somebody bought it. So I don't know. But yeah, that was
something today.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, it would be. Yeah.
Damn, I love it. We could talk about IROC all night, but I wanted to ask you about WCW. So they brought back the Galaxians to WCW when you guys were the Galaxians in Memphis. Is that what happened in early 90s?
Ken and I were doing some things there. I can't remember if we would call the Galaxians in WCW. Because honestly I couldn't remember, because we were just enhancement guys. We were getting, we were just used to get guys over, which is fine. I don't, I never had a problem with that. You know what I mean? And so I can't remember how long. I can't remember how long we worked there doing it. It wasn't long, month or two maybe. I don't know. And but I remember Doug Furness, God rest his soul. He was coming in WCW, and I kind of helped train Doug back in the 80s when he was breaking in the business. He lived with me and my wife about 6 months, probably. We had a place in Birmingham, and he stayed with us in Birmingham, and he taught me the art of lifting weights, and I taught him what I knew as much as I could about wrestling. And so it was a good thing that he and I were, lived together, because we got to go to the gym every day, and and also got to talk about how you would do this or that or whatever as it relates to the business. And anyway, in WCW, I was working with him, and he bellied it back to me and came down on me, because he was about 280 pounds, and just shattered my nose, man. That thing, my nose has been broken like 14 times, wow. over the course of my career. I was always told, well, you shouldn't have moved, So anyway, and he was real tore up about it, and man, no big deal. It's just, it happens, it happens, and that was probably the last time I was actually in the ring with Doug. And then he teamed up with Phil LaFleur, I guess, and went to, got a gig as a Can-Am, Express, and got a gig as the over in Japan and stuff, done real well for himself. And sadly, Parkinson's took him, And so he was a hell of a guy, really was. Doug was a hell of a guy.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah, I think we only did a couple of months, if that, of the Galaxians, because like I said, we were just enhancement guys to get their featured guys over, And I don't know that we did that very well. I don't know. I don't remember.
Well, like you said, you mentioned before how you mentored Steve Austin. I was
Yeah.
gonna say you mentored Doug Furnace too, but mentoring Steve Austin, that's when he goes to USWA, right? So you go to Memphis
Yes.
again. Is that
Yes.
something where you wanted to go kind of quote unquote go back home and go to Memphis and
Yeah. Yeah.
basically kind of mentor guys?
Yeah. Well, I went back there. We were doing, at the same time we were doing the ESPN tapings down in Dallas, at the Sportatorium down there, and they rented a Waylon Jennings tour bus, and about a dozen of us, or no, about 8 or 9 of us, would ride on the bus and go to Dallas to do the tapings. And Steve was always on there, and he was green, breaking into business, and he, one day I was working against him as he was stunning Steve, and I was a baby face there, and he come in the dressing room, says, "Hey, boss," he says, "What do you want to do?" And I says, "I don't know. You're calling it." He said, "What?" He said, "No, I've never called him." No, so anyway, I was the first guy to let him call a match, And he said, "Well, what if I screw it up?" I said, "I'll fix it." Just like that.
Right.
I'll fix it. Don't worry about it. And he and I had a good relationship. Had a good, all through. And he wrote a couple of good things about me in his books. And made me feel good that he remembered. But he's always had good things to say about me, and I've always appreciated that. Always appreciated that. And
did you see him becoming the biggest star in the business?
Well, here's the thing. When we were in Memphis, Tennessee one night, and bless his heart, he was starving to death, because the territory was not doing that great. He was making maybe $40 a night, if that. He was a heel, and so he came to me and he said, "I think I'm gonna go back to Texas. I just can't." He said, "I can't do this shit." He said, I can't keep this up." And I told him, said, "Steve, I don't know what." I said, "But there's something about you, you have what I call the it factor. You just haven't come out of your shell yet." I said, "You have it. There's something about you that's that's gonna make you something." I had no clue what it was. You know what I'm saying? But I don't know. I had a feeling that it's just the way he carried himself and whatnot, and just how he reacted to certain things that I couldn't put it together what it was, but I knew he was going to do okay in the business, and he didn't quit, which is thankful, because if he had, there wouldn't have been an attitude era, I'm sure, but
right.
I couldn't. There's no way I could put my finger on what it was he was going to be. But I knew that he was going to be a positive, for the business, and he was.
Man, it's funny just like looking at not only Steve but the other guys like Cena, Lesnar, Orton. Like seems like you kind of had your eye on the pulse just of knowing of who the guys with the it factor are that are really going to become big stars.
I was blessed. I was put in, I guess, the right place at the right time and met the right people, and like you remember Sylvester Turkey?
Oh yeah. Yep.
I mean, just a huge guy, and he had talent and whatnot. And I think, he would have made it if they had just, given him, a little more opportunity, and would let us put him in a certain character, because there was something he needed, a certain character, and it just didn't happen. And for whatever reason, and I never knew why, but normally when the contracted guys were released from their contract, that would come out of the WWF at the time office. Well, they gave me the unfortunate power to release Turkey and young man I like, Brian Keck, and that was really hard for me to do, because I saw potential there. And I knew there was potential there based on everything else I'd learned, in my years in the business. And I had to like tell them, you got to go. And, that's, those were the only two that I ever had to let go, of WWE guys, because I said, hey, look, I don't like this because I see them one way, you see them another, but I trust my way, and I refuse to do it again because it wasn't anything I like to do. It was not anything I like to do.
Is that part of the reason why the OVW-WB relationship went downhill, or was it also because Jim Ross was like basically not in the same role?
Well, John Laurinaitis was, head of talent relations there.
Yes.
And no, I mean, I think over the years they tried other territories. They tried Deep South Wrestling. They tried HWA. In Cincinnati less, and
yep.
And I think those guys did a hell of a job with everything. But for whatever reason, and I don't know what the reason was. They ended up going away, and OVW stood the test of time. We were producing talent. We were doing everything they wanted to do, but something happened, and it had to do with a character that put on like a soldier guerrilla. You know how they put on this black stuff, to
yep.
Like so that no reflection will come. Anyway.
Yep.
So that happened, and honestly, I didn't know it was going to happen, and I think Al and these guys put it together, and anyhow, it got when WWE, when John Laurinaitis and Ty somebody, I can't remember his name, no disrespect to him, but anyway, they took it as something it wasn't, like with an African American something, and they pulled the plug because I didn't have control of things, supposedly. And I'm like, I didn't even know they were doing this. I mean, I didn't see it until they come out of the locker. Anyhow. And so when John and Ty comes down, he takes me to lunch at a restaurant, Tumbleweeds, not far from where the arena was. and John says, we're going to let you go, and we're pulling the plug here, and we're moving everything to Tampa, where they were setting up. And I said, well, I kind of figured you were going to do that because Steve Kern came up and shadowed me for a week, and I said, I'm pretty sure I kind of knew what was going on there. Anyway, I put my hand on John's shoulder, and I says, thank you, John. Now I can breathe. I never had anything else. I never said anything negative about it. I'm not a guy that goes out publicly and tries to burn the tree down or anything like that. No, it wasn't me. I just took it as it was, and I said, now, I'm going to keep doing this. You're not going to put me out of business because this is my livelihood and this is what it is. And so that's how it ended. They left the talent there for a month before they moved everybody out because most of the talent on my television show at the time, it was about half and half WWE talent and half OVW talent. So I had to restart overnight, had to restart angles and whatnot, so that we wouldn't completely bottom out, which we did. And, and so one thing led to another, and 10 years after they pulled out, that's when I sold the business, and it's still going. One of the things that told me that they were going to pull away from it. So, like, for instance, anytime you do business with a publicly traded company, they have an image, and anything that fingers out from them also has to have an image that met their, so I had to upgrade all of my original television equipment to their standards. You know what I mean? And those cameras and stuff, they weren't cheap. And I didn't have, the financial backing like that. That came out of my pocket. So I had to do all that. And when they were setting up Tampa, FCW, they gave them $1 million worth of equipment. So I'm like, okay, that's telling me something right there. So, I mean, I knew ahead of time, that it was coming, but it's almost like they wanted me to go bankrupt, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and fold. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And because all the indications pointed towards that. And I told him, says, you're not putting me out of business. It took everything I had, John. My retirement money was spent keeping it going, and it broke my heart because, I had done well in the business. I had my nest egg set, to have a nice retirement. And I had a choice. I could close the doors and walk away, but I had about 100 guys and gals there. A lot of them came from overseas and whatnot. And I could not look at myself in the mirror, John, and know that I closed the doors on those kids who came looking for a better way to get into business. Now, financially, I made the wrong decision. My wife right now will tell you I was the dumbest guy on the planet. I shouldn't have done it. But because when WW, that place was costing, there's about $20,000 a month to keep that place going. Okay. For a little territory, that's a lot of money. And when you ain't pulling that in, when you don't have the subsidy of WWE and you're not pulling that in, you really struggle. You struggle. And for 10 years I struggled. And there were some times when I thought I was going to lose it, but I kept fighting and I wouldn't give it up, and finally it just, and when Al and them took it over, we were selling out all of our Saturday night specials. A lot of the spot shows were doing good. And the company had zero debt. It was the only bills I had were the phone bill, the light bill, and the rent. That was it. So, and they got it. Yeah. And so, anyway, there's that story. So
now, as we head towards the finish, we head towards the wind down. What do you think is the legacy of OVW? Like when people look back at it, what's like the lasting legacy?
No, that's to me, that's a no-brainer. It's the John Cena, the Randy Orton, the Brock Lesnar's, and the Batistas that come out of there. That era, and there's going to be nothing that's going to come close to that, because that type of talent does not exist today. Because society has changed. The society as a whole has changed, and those guys aren't like those guys. The guys now aren't like the guys back then. If that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yep. Different.
So I think that's going to be the legacy. Could be wrong, but that's what I believe, John.
Now, what was your favorite part of the business? Wrestling or training or teaching or owning? Like, what was your refereeing? Like, what was your favorite part of the business?
It's got to be my time working for Ron and Robert Fuller in Southeastern and Continental Championship Wrestling. It's got to be there. It's got to be my time in Memphis with Jerry Lawler, with Andy Kaufman. And then it's got to be my time with OVW. So, I mean, there's just no one thing. There's just, I think all of those combined is what, I don't know, makes me feel, like I actually contributed in a positive way to a profession that I absolutely loved while I was in it, that I absolutely loved.
Awesome.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Now, this is where I normally ask about plugs and social media and all this other stuff, but it seems like you're retired. You seem like you don't do any of that stuff.
I don't, and so I'll make it easy for you. See, and so, but no, I mean, like I said, you're probably number 5, that I've done since I've been out. I don't mind doing things, but one of these days, maybe I'll get into doing some more. Who knows? Maybe I'll find a spot somewhere I can make some money off of it. I don't know, but I appreciate you taking the time to want to speak to me. I told Tom, when Tom says, "Hey, you want to do this?" I said, "Yeah, as long as you don't think I'd kill the business, sure, I'll do it." Hey, I love Tom. Tom is the brother I never had, and Tom and I have a great history, and I love the guy. Like I said, he's the brother I never had, and I do anything for Tom. I take a bullet for Tom. Bottom line.
Wow, he is the man. He's the best.
He is.
Danny, thank you,
John.
Yeah, thank you for all the time tonight. I really appreciate it.
And it's